Listen, not everyone in your life is meant to go where you're going. Some people are temporary, some are lessons, and some are liabilities. The truth is, growth requires subtraction, and the strongest move you'll ever make is learning how to walk away silently. No announcements, no explanations, no drama, just distance. Here are 10 people you need to quietly eliminate from your life. 1. The constant critic. There's a certain type of person who doesn't just see flaws, they hunt for them. No matter what you do, how hard you try, or how far you've come, they always manage to find something to pick apart. You could build something incredible, achieve something meaningful, or take a bold step forward, and instead of acknowledgement, you're met with, "Yeah, but," that phrase becomes their signature. That subtle dismissal, that quiet erosion of your confidence. At first, it's confusing. You tell yourself they're just being honest. Maybe they're trying to help. Maybe they see your potential. But over time, a pattern reveals itself. Their feedback isn't constructive, it's constant. It doesn't build you, it slowly breaks you. It doesn't inspire growth, it creates hesitation. You start noticing something dangerous. You're no longer excited to share your ideas with them. You hesitate, you overthink, you edit yourself before even speaking. That's how the constant critic operates. Not loudly, not aggressively, but persistently, like water dripping on stone, slowly wearing it down. The real danger isn't what they say, it's what you start to believe. You begin to question your instincts, you doubt your decisions, you second-guess moves that once felt natural. You shrink, not because you're incapable, but because someone has trained your mind to expect criticism instead of encouragement. And the worst part, they often disguise it as just being real or keeping you grounded. But let's be clear, there's a difference between honesty and habitual negativity. Real support doesn't tear you down every time you try to rise. Real people don't make you feel small for growing. The constant critic doesn't celebrate your wins, they measure them. They don't uplift your efforts, they dissect them. And slowly, without realizing it, you start performing for their approval instead of living for your own progress. That's the moment you have to wake up, because if you stay connected to someone who constantly criticizes you, you will eventually start criticizing yourself in the same voice. Their voice becomes your inner dialogue. Their doubt becomes your hesitation. Their negativity becomes your mindset. And that's too high a price to pay. Now here's the key. You don't confront them, you don't argue, you don't try to prove them wrong. That's a trap. The constant critic thrives on engagement. They'll twist, deflect, and justify their behavior. You'll leave the conversation more drained than when it started. Instead, you shift your behavior. Quietly, you stop sharing everything. You stop seeking their opinion. You stop inviting them into your process. You limit access, not out of anger, but out of awareness. You begin protecting your energy like it matters, because it does. You choose who gets to speak into your life, and slowly, without drama or announcement, you create distance. Conversations become shorter, interactions become fewer, your world becomes quieter and more peaceful. And here's what's powerful. As their voice fades, your own voice gets louder. You start trusting yourself again. You start moving without fear of being picked apart. You start building without waiting for approval. That's when you realize something important. You were never the problem. The environment was. Example. Imagine you're working on a new business idea. You're excited, motivated, and finally taking action. You share it with the constant critic, hoping for support. Instead, they say, "That's risky. What if it fails?" You push forward anyway. Later, you make progress and tell them again. They respond, "It's not that impressive. Lots of people are already doing that." Slowly, your excitement fades. You start doubting yourself. You delay decisions. You hesitate to move forward. Now imagine this instead. You stop telling them. You keep building quietly. You surround yourself with people who either support you or stay neutral. Suddenly, your momentum returns. You move faster, you feel lighter. The only thing that changed was who you allowed to speak into your life. That's the power of quiet elimination. Not every critic deserves a front row seat to your journey. Some don't even deserve a seat at all. 2. The manipulator. Not all control is loud. Not all damage looks like aggression. Some of the most dangerous people in your life don't raise their voice. They adjust yours. They don't force you into decisions. They guide you there, slowly, subtly, until you think it was your idea all along. That's the manipulator. Calm, calculated, strategic, and incredibly hard to detect, until you finally see the pattern. At first, everything feels normal. They're charming, understanding, even supportive. They listen closely, ask questions, and make you feel seen. But what you don't realize is they're collecting data, your fears, your weaknesses, your insecurities, all quietly stored away, not to protect you, but to use later. And when the moment comes, they don't attack directly. They shift the narrative. You say no, they make you feel guilty. You set a boundary, they make you feel selfish. You express discomfort, they flip it and make you the problem. Suddenly you're apologizing for something you didn't even do wrong. That's not coincidence. That's control. The manipulator doesn't argue to understand. They argue to win. They twist words, reframe situations, and subtly rewrite reality until you're questioning your own memory. You walk away from conversations confused, drained, and unsure of what just happened. You replay it in your head, trying to figure out where things went wrong. Here's the truth. It didn't go wrong. It was designed that way. They use guilt like a weapon. They use silence as punishment. They use kindness as leverage. One moment they're warm and supportive. The next, they withdraw completely. That inconsistency keeps you hooked. You start chasing their approval, trying to fix things, trying to get back to the version of them that felt good. But that version isn't real. It's a tool. And the more you try to please them, the more control they gain. You start adjusting your behavior, walking on eggshells, over-explaining yourself, avoiding conflict at all costs. Without realizing it, you've handed them influence over your emotions, your decisions, even your identity. And the scariest part? It happens slowly. You don't wake up one day and say, "I'm being manipulated." You wake up feeling tired, drained, slightly off, like something isn't right, but you can't quite explain it. That's because manipulation doesn't leave obvious scars. It leaves confusion. But once you see it, you can't unsee it. You start noticing the patterns, how every disagreement somehow becomes your fault, how your boundaries are always too much, how their needs always come first. That's your signal, that's your clarity, and that's your exit point. Now listen, this is important. You do not confront the manipulator expecting honesty or accountability. That's a losing game. They will deny, deflect, and flip the situation so smoothly you'll end up doubting yourself again. They don't play fair, and they don't play to lose. So instead, you change the strategy. You stop explaining yourself. You stop defending every decision. You stop engaging in circular conversations. You become neutral, calm, unreactive, because manipulation feeds on emotion. The more you react, the more power they have. But when you stop reacting, when you stop giving them access to your emotional energy, they lose control. And then you create distance, quietly. No dramatic exit, no long message, no final argument, just less availability, shorter responses, more space. You detach, piece by piece, until one day they no longer have influence over you. And here's what happens next. It's powerful. Your mind clears. Your confidence returns. Your decisions feel like your own again. You stop second-guessing everything. You stop feeling guilty for things that were never your responsibility. you finally feel free. Because manipulation only works when you're still participating in it. Once you step out of the game, it ends. Example: imagine you have a friend who constantly asks for favors, rides, money, time, support. At first you're happy to help, but one day you say no, you're busy, tired, or simply not available. Instead of respecting that, they respond with, "Wow, I guess I know where I stand now," or "After everything I've done for you." Suddenly you feel guilty, you start questioning yourself, so you give in, again and again. Over time, this becomes a pattern. Every time you try to set a boundary, they twist it into betrayal. Now imagine you recognize it. The next time they try it, you don't argue, you don't explain, you simply repeat your no and disengage. No emotional reaction, no back and forth. Then slowly, you reduce how often you're available to them. You stop being their go-to, and just like that, their control fades, not because they changed, but because you did. That's how you quietly eliminate the manipulator, not with confrontation, but with awareness, detachment, and distance. 3. The gossip carrier. Pay close attention to the person who always has something to say about everyone else. The one who leans in a little closer, lowers their voice, and starts with, "Don't tell anyone I told you this." That sentence alone is a warning sign, not because of what they're about to say, but because of what it reveals about who they are. This is the gossip carrier, the messenger of secrets, the distributor of private information, the person who always seems to know everyone's business except how to mind their own. At first, it feels harmless, even entertaining. You hear stories, updates, drama, things you weren't supposed to know. It creates a strange sense of closeness, like you're being trusted with inside information. But that feeling is an illusion. Because if they're bringing you other people's secrets, one thing is guaranteed: they're carrying yours somewhere else. That's not paranoia, that's pattern recognition. The gossip carrier thrives on information, not for understanding, but for relevance. Being in the know makes them feel important. It gives them social currency. Every secret they carry becomes leverage. Every story becomes a tool to stay connected, to stay interesting, to stay involved in conversations they were never meant to be part of. And the way they operate is subtle. They don't always sound malicious. Sometimes it comes wrapped in concern. "I'm just worried about them." Other times it sounds like curiosity. "Did you hear what happened?" But underneath it all is the same behavior, sharing what isn't theirs to share. The danger isn't just in what they say about others, it's in what they slowly train you to accept. You start getting comfortable with hearing private things. You start participating, adding your own thoughts, maybe even your own information. And without realizing it, you become part of the same cycle, a cycle where trust is constantly broken, but no one addresses it directly. Until one day, it circles back to you. You notice a shift. Someone mentions something you only told one person. A private conversation somehow becomes public knowledge. Details get twisted. Context disappears. Now your name is moving through rooms you're not even in. And that's when it hits you. The same way they talk to you, they've been talking about you. That realization changes everything. Because trust isn't just about loyalty in your presence. It's about respect in your absence, and the gossip carrier has none. They don't protect conversations. They recycle them. They don't value privacy. They trade it. They don't build relationships. They exploit them. And the longer you stay connected to someone like this, the more exposed you become. Not because you did anything wrong, but because you trusted someone who doesn't know how to hold information with integrity. Now here's the key. You don't confront them emotionally. You don't accuse them or demand explanations. That only creates more conversation, more fuel, more material for them to carry elsewhere. Instead, you shift your behavior. You stop telling them personal things. You keep conversations surface level. You observe more than you speak. You become intentional with your words, strategic with your silence, and slowly you reduce access. Not dramatically, not obviously, just enough that they no longer have anything valuable to carry. No new stories, no personal updates, no emotional details. And here's what happens when you do that. They lose interest because the gossip carrier isn't drawn to you, they're drawn to your information. And when that supply runs out, so does their reason to stay close. That's how you create distance without conflict. And as you step back, something powerful happens. You start valuing privacy on a deeper level. You become more selective about who gets access to your life. You understand that not everyone deserves to hear your thoughts, your plans, or your struggles. Because information is power, and in the wrong hands, it becomes a weapon. Example, imagine you share something personal with a friend. Maybe you're going through a tough situation, or planning something important in your life. It's not public information. It's something you trusted them with. A few days later, someone else casually brings it up in conversation. They weren't supposed to know. You feel that moment of confusion, then realization. There's only one place it could have come from. Now, instead of confronting immediately, you observe, you test it. You stop sharing anything meaningful with that person. Conversations become light, basic, surface level. Weeks go by, and suddenly, nothing about you is being discussed anymore. Why? Because there's nothing left for them to carry. You didn't argue. You didn't expose them. You simply removed access, and in doing so, you protected your peace. That's the quiet power of eliminating the gossip carrier, not by fighting them, but by starving the behavior that keeps them close. Because the moment you protect your privacy, you protect your life. 4. The one who makes you doubt yourself. There's a kind of person who doesn't break you loudly. They unravel you quietly. No shouting, no obvious disrespect, no clear moment you can point to and say, that's when everything changed. Instead, it's subtle, gradual, almost invisible. But the impact? Deep. This is the one who makes you doubt yourself. Before them, you were decisive. You trusted your instincts. You moved with confidence, even when you didn't have all the answers. You made choices, took risks, and stood by your opinions. You felt grounded in who you were. Then they entered your life, and slowly, that certainty started to fade. It begins with small comments, harmless on the surface. Are you sure that's a good idea? I don't know. That doesn't really sound like you. You might want to rethink that. At first, it feels like concern, like they're just being cautious, looking out for you. But then it keeps happening. Every idea you share gets questioned. Every decision you make gets analyzed. Every move you take gets second-guessed. Not aggressively, but consistently. And that consistency is what changes you. Because doubt, repeated often enough, becomes belief. You start hesitating before you speak. You rehearse your thoughts in your head before saying them out loud. You look to them for confirmation, approval, validation. What used to be natural now feels uncertain. What used to be clear now feels confusing. And the most dangerous part, you don't even realize it's happening. You think you're just being more careful, more thoughtful, more aware. But in reality, you're becoming less yourself. They don't need to control you directly. They just need to make you question your own control. And once that happens, they've already shifted the power dynamic. Now you're not moving based on your instincts. You're moving based on how they might react. You're filtering your decisions through their perspective. You're shrinking your voice to avoid being questioned. That's not growth. That's quiet dependency. The one who makes you doubt yourself doesn't always have bad intentions. Sometimes they're projecting their own fears, their own insecurities, their own limitations. They see your confidence, your boldness, your willingness to move, and it makes them uncomfortable. So they slow you down, not because you need it, but because they do. And if you stay around that long enough, something shifts inside you. You stop trusting your gut. You stop taking risks. You start playing small, not because you've lost your ability, but because someone has trained you to question it. And here's the truth you need to hear. Your instincts were never the problem. The environment was. Because the right people don't make you feel uncertain about yourself. They make you feel clearer. They don't plant doubt. They reinforce belief. They don't make you shrink. They make you expand. So when you start feeling like you're losing your sense of direction around someone, pay attention. That feeling is information. That's your signal. Now here's the move. And it's not confrontation. You don't sit them down and explain everything. You don't try to prove your confidence or defend your decisions. That only pulls you deeper into the cycle of needing their validation. Instead, you shift your behavior quietly. You stop asking for their opinion on everything. You make decisions without consulting them. You trust your first instinct again and act on it. And most importantly, you create space. You limit how often you're around them. You reduce how much influence they have over your thinking. You reclaim your mental independence, because confidence isn't something you need to build from scratch. It's something you recover once the noise is gone. And as you step back, something powerful happens. Your clarity returns. Your voice gets stronger. Your decisions feel natural again. You realize you were never indecisive. You were just surrounded by someone who constantly made you feel like you were. And once you remove that influence, everything changes. Example, imagine you're planning to make a big move, starting a new project, changing careers, or pursuing something you've always wanted. You feel excited, nervous, but ready. You share it with this person, expecting support, or at least neutral feedback. Instead, they respond with, "I don't know. What if it doesn't work out?" Or, "That seems like a big risk. Are you sure you're ready for that?" You start thinking, maybe they're right. Maybe you should wait. You delay. You overanalyze. Days turn into weeks. The excitement fades. Now imagine a different approach. You stop sharing your plans with them. You make the decision on your own. You take action without inviting doubt into the process. Suddenly, you're moving again. Progress replaces hesitation. Confidence replaces confusion. The only difference? You removed the voice that was making you question yourself. That's the quiet elimination. Not dramatic, not obvious, but powerful. Because the moment you stop listening to the voice that makes you doubt yourself, you finally start hearing your own again. 5. The comfort zone keeper. Not everyone in your life wants to see you fail, but not everyone is ready to see you grow either. And sometimes, the people who hold you back the most aren't your enemies. They're the ones who feel familiar, close, safe. The ones who've known you for years, the ones who say they care about you. This is the comfort zone keeper. They don't attack your dreams. They don't openly criticize your ambition. Instead, they do something far more subtle. They normalize staying the same. They keep you anchored to a version of yourself that no longer fits who you're becoming. At first, it feels like loyalty, like history, like connection. But over time, it starts to feel like pressure. You begin to notice it in small ways. You talk about your goals, your plans, your desire to level up, and they respond with things like, "Why do you want to do all that?" Or, "You're doing too much." Or the classic, "You've changed." And that last one, that one hits differently, because it's not just a statement, it's a signal. What they really mean is, you're stepping outside the version of yourself I'm comfortable with. The comfort zone keeper doesn't want to lose you, but they don't realize they're trying to keep you small to keep you close. They're used to the old you, the predictable you, the version of you that fits into their routine, their mindset, their level of effort. When you start evolving, thinking bigger, acting differently, raising your standards, it disrupts that balance. So they try to pull you back, not aggressively, not obviously, but consistently. They invite you into old habits. They joke about your discipline. They downplay your progress. Come on, It's not that serious. Relax, you're doing too much. You used to be more fun, and if you're not careful, you start listening, because there's comfort in familiarity. There's ease in going back to what you know. It's tempting to slow down, to blend in, to return to the version of yourself that everyone recognizes. But here's the truth. Growth always feels uncomfortable to people who aren't growing, and the comfort zone keeper isn't trying to destroy your progress. They're trying to protect their normal. Your ambition challenges their routine. Your discipline exposes their inconsistency. Your evolution reminds them of what they're not doing. So instead of rising with you, they try to bring you back down to where things feel equal again. That's not support. That's silent resistance. And the longer you stay in that environment, the harder it becomes to keep moving forward. Not because you lack motivation, but because you're constantly being pulled backward in subtle ways. You skip one productive day, then another. You loosen your standards just a little. You start making exceptions just to fit in. And before you realize it, you're drifting. Not because you chose to stop growing, but because you stayed connected to people who never intended to grow with you. Now here's the part that matters most. You don't confront them. You don't sit them down and explain your transformation. You don't try to convince them to understand your goals or match your energy, because the truth is, not everyone is meant to come with you. Some people are meant to know you, not grow with you. So instead, you shift your behavior quietly. You stop engaging in habits that no longer serve you. You decline invitations that pull you backward. You protect your routines, your focus, your discipline, and most importantly, you create distance, not out of disrespect, but out of direction. You spend less time in environments that keep you stagnant. You surround yourself with people who challenge you to rise. You build a space where growth feels normal, not too much. And as you do that, something powerful happens. You stop feeling guilty for evolving. You stop explaining your ambition. You stop shrinking to make others comfortable. You realize that becoming a new version of yourself isn't betrayal. It's necessary. And the people who are meant to stay, they'll adjust. They'll respect it. They'll grow with you. But the comfort zone keeper, they'll slowly fade. Not because you pushed them away, but because you stopped living in a space they were comfortable in. Example, imagine you decide to take your life more seriously. You start waking up earlier, working on your goals, cutting out distractions, focusing on building something meaningful. At first, your friend group notices. They laugh it off. Look at you, trying to be productive now, they say. Then they start inviting you to the same late-night routines, the same unproductive habits. You decline a few times. They respond with, "You've changed," or "You think you're better than us now." That pressure builds. You feel torn. So one night you give in, then another. Slowly, your new habits start slipping. Now imagine a different approach. You stay consistent. You politely decline without over-explaining. You reduce how often you're in those environments. You find new circles that align with your goals. Weeks later, your progress speaks for itself. You didn't argue. You didn't announce anything. You just chose growth over comfort and let distance happen naturally. That's how you quietly eliminate the comfort zone keeper, not with conflict, but with commitment to who you're becoming. Because the life you want will always require you to leave behind the version of you that settled for less, and anyone who insists you stay there. 6. The excuse maker. There's a person in your life who never fails because they never truly try. Not all at once, not fully, not consistently. Every time something doesn't work out, there's always a reason. Perfectly packaged, emotionally convincing, and just believable enough to make you nod your head and say, "Yeah, that makes sense." This is the excuse maker. They don't lack intelligence. They don't lack opportunity. They don't even lack awareness. What they lack is accountability, and instead of facing that truth, they've mastered something far more dangerous. They've learned how to justify staying the same. At first, you feel empathy for them. Life is hard. Things happen. Circumstances matter. And yes, sometimes excuses are valid. But with the excuse maker, it's not occasional, it's constant. There's always something. They didn't start because the timing wasn't right. They didn't finish because something came up. They didn't succeed because someone else had an advantage. And every time, it sounds reasonable. That's the trap. Because over time, their excuses stop sounding like explanations and start becoming a mindset. And if you stay around that mindset long enough, it becomes contagious. You start thinking the same way. You begin to justify your own delays. You start lowering your standards, just slightly. You become more comfortable with later, tomorrow, and eventually, not because you want to, but because you've been surrounded by someone who has normalized it. That's how the excuse maker influences you. Not through pressure, but through permission. They make it okay to not show up fully. They make it normal to avoid discomfort. They make it acceptable to stay stuck, because there's always a reason. And here's the truth most people don't want to admit. Excuses feel good. They protect your ego. They remove responsibility. They give you something to blame, but they also quietly steal your progress. Because every excuse is a decision to stay where you are, and if you're serious about growth, you can't afford to adopt that mindset, even indirectly. The excuse maker doesn't just stay stuck. They invite you to stay stuck with them. They'll say things like, "It's not that serious. You're doing too much. Why stress yourself?" It sounds harmless, even comforting, but underneath it is a subtle pull. A pull away from discipline, from consistency, from the uncomfortable actions that actually create results. They don't push you to stop. They just make stopping feel reasonable. And that's what makes them dangerous. Because you won't notice the shift immediately. It happens slowly. You skip one day. It's fine. You delay one task. It's understandable. You make one excuse. It's justified. But those small decisions stack up. And before you know it, you're not moving the way you used to. You're not as sharp, not as focused, not as committed. Not because you lost your drive, but because you've been around someone who made it easy to lose it. Now here's the key. You don't attack them. You don't call them out or try to force them to change. That rarely works. People only outgrow excuses when they decide to take responsibility for their own life. Instead, you shift your position. You stop engaging in conversations that revolve around excuses. You stop agreeing with justifications that don't align with your standards. You stop lowering your pace to match theirs. You quietly separate your mindset. You become more disciplined, more intentional, more focused, and you let your actions speak for themselves. And then, you create distance, not dramatically, not harshly, just intentionally. You spend less time in environments where excuses are normal. You surround yourself with people who take ownership. You align yourself with those who act, even when it's hard, because environment shapes behavior. And if you want to rise, you have to be around people who move, not people who explain why they can't. And here's what happens when you do that. Your standards rise again. You stop negotiating with your goals. You stop waiting for perfect conditions. You start executing consistently, regardless of how you feel. You remember that progress doesn't come from reasons. It comes from results. And suddenly, the mindset of the excuse maker no longer feels comfortable. It feels limiting. That's how you know you've outgrown it. Example: imagine you and a friend both talk about getting in better shape. You're motivated. You make a plan. The first few days, everything is aligned, but then your friend starts slipping. "I'm too tired today," they say. The next day, "I'll start next week." Then, "I've just been busy." You understand. You've felt those things too. So one day, you skip your workout as well. It feels justified. Then it happens again. Slowly, your consistency fades. Now imagine a different approach. You notice the pattern. You stop discussing your routine with them. You stick to your plan, regardless of what they say. When they offer excuses, you don't argue. You just continue doing what needs to be done. Over time, your results speak louder than their reasons. You didn't criticize them. You didn't try to fix them. You simply refused to adopt their mindset and created distance from it. That's the quiet elimination of the excuse maker, not by changing them, but by refusing to become them. Because at the end of the day, excuses don't build anything. They only explain why nothing was built. 7. The time waster. There's one resource in your life that you can never earn back, never replace, and never recover once it's gone. And that's your time. Not your money, not your energy, your time. And yet there's a person in your life who treats it like it's unlimited, like it has no value, like it exists just to be spent, with no return. This is the time waster. They don't show up with bad intentions. They're not trying to ruin your life. In fact, they often feel easy to be around, comfortable, entertaining. They make time pass quickly, and that's exactly the problem. Because when you're around them, hours disappear and nothing moves forward. Conversations that go nowhere, plans that lead to nothing, moments that feel full but leave no impact. At first, it doesn't seem like a big deal. You tell yourself, I deserve to relax. It's good to unwind. And you're right, rest is necessary. But there's a difference between intentional rest and unintentional waste. The time waster lives in that difference. They pull you into routines that look harmless on the surface. Endless scrolling, pointless debates, repetitive conversations, distractions disguised as connection. You sit down for a few minutes and suddenly hours are gone. You had plans, goals, things you said you were going to do. Now they're delayed again. And the worst part, it doesn't feel like you did anything wrong. That's what makes the time waster so dangerous. There's no obvious damage, no conflict, no negativity, just drift. You're not moving backward, but you're definitely not moving forward. And in life, standing still for too long is the same as falling behind. The time waster doesn't pressure you to stop growing. They just redirect your focus. They keep you occupied, busy, distracted. So distracted that you don't even realize how much time you're losing. You start pushing things back. I'll do it later. I'll start tomorrow. I just need more time. But the truth is, you had the time. You just gave it away. And over weeks, months, even years, that cost adds up. Dreams stay ideas, plans stay unfinished, potential stays unused. Not because you weren't capable, but because your time was constantly being consumed by someone who didn't value it the way you should. Now here's where it gets deeper. The time waster often comes disguised as familiarity. It's the friend you always hang out with, the person you always call when you're bored, the one who fills your empty moments, but never pushes you toward meaningful ones. And because there's no tension, no conflict, no obvious toxicity, it's easy to justify keeping them around. But growth doesn't just require removing negativity. It requires removing distraction, because distraction is the silent killer of progress. You don't fail, you just never finish. You don't quit, you just never fully commit. You don't lose, you just never execute, all because your time is being quietly drained. And here's the reality. Your future is built on how you spend your present, not occasionally, not when it's convenient, but consistently. So if your time is constantly being spent in ways that don't align with your goals, your results will reflect that. Now listen carefully. You don't need to confront the time waster. You don't accuse them. You don't make it dramatic, because they won't see it the way you do. To them, everything is fine, comfortable, normal. Instead, you change your behavior. You become intentional with your time. You schedule your priorities instead of leaving them optional. You reduce unplanned interactions. You stop being available by default. That's the key. You don't pick up every call. You don't say yes to every hangout. You don't fill every free moment with noise. You create structure, because structure protects your time. And then You create distance, not aggressively, not obviously, just enough to reclaim control over your hours, your focus, your life. You start spending more time alone or with people who respect your time, people who are building, creating, moving, people who don't just pass time, but use it. And as you do that, something powerful happens. You get more done, you feel more focused, you start seeing progress again. You realize that you didn't need more time, you just needed to protect it. And once you understand that, you stop giving it away so freely. Example, imagine you have a goal. Maybe it's starting a project, learning a skill, or improving your life in some way. You set aside time to work on it, but then your phone rings. It's that one person. "What are you doing?" they ask. "Nothing important," you reply. Next thing you know, you're on a long call, or hanging out, or scrolling together, or just passing time. Hours go by. You tell yourself you'll work on your goal later, but later never comes. This becomes a pattern. Days turn into weeks, and your progress stays the same. Now imagine a different approach. You recognize it. The next time they call, you don't pick up immediately. You finish what you planned first. You start setting boundaries around your time. You become less available for unproductive moments. Slowly, the dynamic changes. You're still respectful, but you're no longer accessible at the cost of your goals. And suddenly, your progress returns, not because you worked harder, but because you stopped letting your time slip away. That's how you quietly eliminate the time waster, not by cutting them off completely, but by cutting off their access to your time. Because at the end of the day, your life is nothing more than a collection of how you spend your hours. And if you don't control your time, someone else will. 8. The one who doesn't respect your growth. Growth is supposed to feel empowering. It's supposed to feel like expansion, like stepping into a stronger, sharper, more disciplined version of yourself. But there's a certain type of person who makes your growth feel uncomfortable. Not because growth is hard, but because they don't respect it. This is the one who doesn't respect your growth. They don't always come at you directly. They don't necessarily insult you or openly attack your progress. Instead, they undermine it, quietly, consistently, in ways that are easy to dismiss at first, but impossible to ignore over time. It starts with subtle reactions. You improve your habits. They laugh it off. You get more focused. They call you too serious. You raise your standards. They say you're doing too much. It sounds like jokes, harmless comments. But there's a pattern underneath it. They're not celebrating your evolution, they're resisting it. Because your growth forces a shift. It changes the dynamic. The version of you they were comfortable with is disappearing. And the new version, it doesn't fit as easily into the space they're used to. So instead of adjusting, they try to pull you back, not with force, but with friction. They question your discipline. They mock your consistency. They minimize your progress. You've changed. You're not the same anymore. It's not that deep. And those words carry weight, especially when they come from someone you once felt aligned with. Because now, you feel a tension. A part of you wants to keep growing. Another part of you feels pressure to stay the same. That's the conflict they create. And if you're not careful, you start negotiating with your own growth. You skip a few habits just to fit in. You tone yourself down just to avoid comments. You hold back just to keep the peace. But here's the truth. Growth that has to be hidden isn't sustainable, and people who don't respect your evolution will slowly make you feel like you have to shrink to stay connected. That's not support. That's limitation disguised as familiarity. The one who doesn't respect your growth isn't always trying to hurt you. Sometimes they're just uncomfortable. Your discipline highlights their inconsistency. Your progress reminds them of what they're not doing. Your transformation challenges their identity, so instead of rising to meet you, they try to bring you back to where things feel equal. But equal doesn't mean aligned, and staying in a space where your growth is dismissed will cost you more than you realize. It will cost you momentum. It will cost you confidence. It will cost you consistency, because you can't fully become who you're meant to be in an environment that constantly questions who you're becoming. Now here's the important part. You don't argue with them. You don't try to explain your vision, justify your discipline, or convince them to understand your path. Because the truth is, people only respect growth they recognize, and not everyone is ready for that. Instead, you shift your approach. You stop seeking validation from them. You stop explaining your choices. You let your actions speak louder than your words. You move with quiet confidence. And then, you create distance, not out of anger, but out of alignment. You spend less time in conversations that make you feel like you're too much. You avoid environments that tempt you to go backward. You surround yourself with people who see growth as normal, not excessive. Because the right people won't question your evolution, they'll respect it. They won't make you feel like you have to shrink. They'll make you feel like you can expand even more. And as you step away from those who don't respect your growth, something powerful happens. You stop feeling guilty for leveling up. You stop apologizing for your discipline. You stop explaining your ambition. You realize that becoming better isn't something you need permission for. It's something you owe yourself. And the people who truly belong in your life, they won't be threatened by your growth. They'll be inspired by it. But the ones who aren't, they'll slowly fade, not because you pushed them away, but because you stopped meeting them at a level you've outgrown. Example, imagine you decide to change your lifestyle. You start waking up earlier, working on your goals, being more intentional with your time. You cut out distractions and focus on building something meaningful. At first, someone close to you notices. They laugh and say, "Look at you, all disciplined now." You smile it off, but it keeps happening. Every time you choose growth over comfort, they make a comment, "Relax, it's not that serious. You're acting different." Slowly, it starts to affect you. You feel like you have to explain yourself. You feel pressure to loosen up. So one day, you give in. You skip your routine. Then again, your consistency starts to break. Now imagine a different approach. You stop explaining. You continue your habits without reacting to their comments. You reduce how often you're in situations where your growth is mocked. You stay focused. Weeks later, your results speak for themselves. You didn't argue. You didn't try to change them. You simply respected your own growth enough to protect it. That's how you quietly eliminate the one who doesn't respect your growth. Not with confrontation, but with commitment. Because the moment you stop shrinking to fit someone else's comfort zone is the moment you finally step into your full potential. 9. The drama magnet. Some people bring peace into a room. Others bring attention. And then there are those who bring chaos everywhere they go. This is the drama magnet. You don't have to look for drama when they're around. Drama finds them. Arguments follow them. Misunderstandings orbit them. Conflicts seem to appear out of nowhere, but somehow they're always in the center of it. At first, it feels exciting, intense, emotional. There's always something happening, a new situation, a new story, a new problem, and it can make life feel dramatic in a way that keeps you alert and engaged. But over time, you start noticing something. Every conversation turns into a debate. Every small issue becomes a big deal. Every neutral situation becomes a crisis. The drama magnet doesn't just experience chaos. They amplify it. They thrive on emotional reactions. When things are calm, they often feel restless. When things are stable, they sometimes create tension, intentionally or unintentionally, because chaos feels familiar to them. And if you stay around long enough, you'll start feeling it too. You'll notice your stress levels rising, your patience getting shorter, your thoughts becoming more reactive. Because drama is contagious. When someone constantly operates in conflict mode, you begin operating there too. You start preparing for the next problem, you expect tension, you anticipate arguments, and that mindset alone can drain your energy. The real danger isn't the drama itself. It's the constant exposure to it. You may find yourself getting pulled into situations that have nothing to do with you. You're asked to take sides. You're expected to mediate conflicts. You're dragged into misunderstandings that could have resolved themselves. And suddenly, your peace is no longer yours. The drama magnet often frames everything emotionally. They react quickly, speak impulsively, and escalate situations without slowing down to assess them calmly. Their intensity can feel powerful, but it's not always productive. And here's the pattern you'll start to see. When there's silence, they feel uncomfortable. When there's stability, they may stir something up. When there's calm, they sometimes introduce chaos, not because they want to destroy, but because drama keeps them engaged. But your life doesn't need constant intensity to feel meaningful. Growth is quiet, progress is steady, success is consistent. Drama, on the other hand, is distracting. If you remain connected to someone who constantly creates or attracts drama, you'll spend more time solving problems than building your future, more time reacting than planning, more time defending than progressing. And that's not a coincidence, that's influence.